Art. Hello, you from Ukraine, from Odessa. How are you?
I'm lovely. It's a slightly overcast morning here in Los Angeles, but that is kind of normal for May and June. We always get a little bit of coastal fog, and it settles in West LA, and it burns off for about a couple of hours in the afternoon, and then it comes back in.
First of all, Art, tell me please a little bit about your activities for our Russian and Ukrainian viewers. Where do you live? What do you do, etc.?
Absolutely. I live in West Los Angeles, and the majority of my work is entertainment related, shooting for television networks, movie studios, streaming services, shooting both their advertising and their publicity. And there is a difference between the two. And I do a lot of magazine work for magazines, for American magazines, and some magazines overseas, and some commercial work as well. I am doing both stills and directing shorter video pieces. I have a studio manager and an agent and business manager, and on any given project, my studio manager, who's also my first assistant, and I are putting together a crew of 2 assistants, 3 assistants, 4 assistants, a digital tech. Maybe there's going to be a producer and a hair and a makeup and a wardrobe and a set designer. So my crew expands and contracts depending on the job.
Tell me please, how did photography come into your life? And how did you learn this art?
Great question. I always had a camera in my hands as long as I can remember. My grandfather on my mother's side was a very, very, very avid amateur photographer, and he had his own darkroom. And when I got into middle school in about 8th grade, my grandfather sold my brother Paul and I a Canon AE1, and he threw in a 50mm lens for about $7. And I immediately took the camera to school and started taking pictures. And I was shooting Tri-X, and I would come back to his darkroom, and he showed me how to develop the film, make proof sheets, and make prints. And I just fell in love with the process of the magic of the darkroom. I fell in love with, you could have this film in a capsule that through these various chemical processes could become a print, a moment in time, a memory. And ironically, it was my brother Paul who was published first. And he will never let me forget that. But in high school, I was the photo editor of the yearbook and the newspaper, running the darkroom at my high school. And then right before I went to college, I was going to my grandfather's alma mater, Stanford University, and he took me aside and he said, remember, photography is an avocation. It is not a vocation. Photography is a hobby, not a job, because that's what it was for him. He was in the magazine wholesale business, which is where I learned to love, fell in love with magazines. And I said, yes, I get it. Absolutely. And I went to Stanford and I immediately walked into the school paper and started taking pictures. And unfortunately, my grandfather passed away probably in the December of my sophomore year, my second year, and he never got to see my photography career. At the end of college, I did an internship at Life magazine in New York City. And after I graduated, I did an internship at a newspaper at a small town outside of Los Angeles called the Riverside Press Enterprise. I was there for the summer, and simultaneously, I had been working at a small, literally mom and pop camera store in my hometown, where the customers would come in and we would fix their cameras, figure out why the film wasn't going through the camera correctly, take their film, send it to the lab, bring it back. And then my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, and has been for 31 years, she got a job at Women's Wear Daily in Los Angeles. And at the time, Women's Wear Daily had the daily fashion newspaper, W Magazine, M Magazine, and a bunch of other trade magazines. And I started freelancing for them. When they wanted to hire a staff photographer, the guy they wanted turned them down. So they hired me. And so I was on staff at Women's Wear Daily, shooting fashion, travel, food, portraits, event photography, interiors, whatever they needed, and learning on the job, literally learning on the job. I had no formal training. So I would reach out to professionals, and reached out to a very, very good friend of mine who was going to Arts-Center College in Pasadena, and say, how do you shoot food? And he would say, put the light behind the food. And I'd say, okay, great. And I would go to the newsstands and look at all of the other magazines to try to figure out, okay, this is what portraiture looks like. This is what travel looks like. And I kind of became a jack of all trades and a master of none. And after a couple of years at Women's Wear Daily in Los Angeles, the bosses in New York called us up. We had just gotten engaged and said, we want you guys to run the Milan Bureau. And we said, we've never been to Italy. And they said, why don't you go check it out and tell us what you think? And I hung up the phone and I turned to my fiance and I said, that was our boss, Patrick. He wants to send us to Milan. So about 5 months later, we were on a plane. We landed on a Thursday and the Milan fashion shows started that Sunday. So now from 1989 to 1993, we were in Milan and I was shooting fashion, interiors, portraits, travel, reportage events, still lifes, but doing it in Italian. And sidebar, I made a couple of trips to London, Paris Fashion Week. I went to Moscow, I went to Berlin, and we were there for 4 years. We came back in the fall of 1993, and I've been trying to figure out how to be a freelance photographer ever since.
Wow.
That is the entire history.
Yes, thank you. Art, you work a lot with famous people. You know, there is a perception that celebrities are easier to work with in portraits than ordinary people because they're professionals and know what to do in front of the camera. Is that true?
No, it is not. And that is a fantastic question, because that is a huge misunderstanding about how celebrity photography works. And the truth is that the majority of actors and actresses, when they get in front of a still camera, and this happened to me yesterday, they will say to me, just tell me what you want me to do. Just, you tell me exactly what you want. And I didn't get it for the longest time. And I finally realized that when they work, they are inhabiting a role. They have lines to recite. They have emotions to convey. They have blocking to accomplish. And they are taking direction from a director. So when they get in front of a still camera, they still expect and need to be directed. And I was given a gift a long time ago by my best friend from college, who's a video producer. And he said to me, he came out on one of my sets and he said, "You're a director." And this was before motion. And I said, no, I'm a photographer. And he said, "Oh no, you're a director. You are directing this entire production. You are directing the talent. You are managing your crew." And I thought, oh wow, that is a huge responsibility, because I had kind of grown up in fashion, and really talented models know how to move and how to stand and how to convey looks and how to show off the clothes. And actors and actresses, again, for the most part, they don't. You know, they're used to hiding in a character. So it is either a very, very, very seasoned actor who's done it a million times, who's very comfortable in front of the camera, or somebody who is confident in front of the camera. So I came up with this saying years ago, and when I teach, I share this, which is treat real people like celebrities and treat celebrities like real people when you shoot portraiture. And the idea is that if you're going to go shoot a lawyer or a baker or a professor, you should do your homework and know them and be curious and be interested and really shine a spotlight on them. But when you're shooting an actor or an actress, you don't want to walk in the room and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm such a huge fan. I love all of your movies. Oh my gosh, in that one movie where you ran through the door and broke the whole place down," because that's what they hear from their fans and people on the street every single day. And what they want to hear from you is, "All right, here's what we're doing. I need you to come over here and we're going to stand here and the light's going to be here. And then I'm going to need you to turn and convey, and this is what we're up to." So you're a partner, you're a collaborator and not a fan.
Yes.
So the answer to your question is, it's difficult.
Yes. But I've also heard the opinion that famous people know how to behave in front of the camera, how to best present themselves, etc. But at the same time, they do not show themselves to be real. And every time we see a certain phantom image of an absolutely happy and successful person. Do you agree with this?
I think that's partially true. But if I were coming to take your portrait, you would present the version of yourself that you want to present.
Of course.
Right? And if I said to you, "You know what, Katarina, I want to put you in this red ball gown and I want to stand you on the desk and I want to grab one of those swords, no, two of those swords behind you and hold them over your head," you might say, "I don't feel comfortable doing that. That's not me. Maybe I could sit behind the desk," and it's a negotiation and a collaboration. So I don't know that I am necessarily in the business of showing their true selves. I am capturing a version of their public self that is the version that day in that moment, wearing those clothes in that location or on that backdrop. So I'm not a psychologist. I'm not putting them on the couch. I'm not trying to really dig in. I'm just trying to get just a little bit of a reveal, like I would with anybody, with you. So I think there's artifice in all portraiture, a little bit. But I think for me, getting your subject, whether they are famous or not, to collaborate in some way that's the goal. You know, that it is a shared experience. I'm not taking anything from them. They're giving me what they feel comfortable in that moment giving.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, understand. Art, please tell me about the cameras that you use now. Do you still shoot on film, maybe?
All of my film cameras are in the garage, and I have not shot on film in about 5 years. Mm-hmm. And that was a request by a friend of mine on their wedding day. So no, I am shooting the Canon 5D Mark IV, but transitioning to the Canon R5, and I'm shooting the Hasselblad H5. And these, you know, the cameras for me right now are, they're workhorses, they are tools in order to get the job done. And I often get asked, you know, when do you choose to shoot the Canon? When do you choose to shoot the Hasselblad? And my answer is that each of them does a different job, and they're capable of doing different things. And if you buy a set of knives, again, a knife reference, if you buy a set of knives, you'll notice that there are 12 different knives in that block. They all do a different job. You know, this extends to lighting as well. I had an intern a couple of years ago, and she hates it when I tell this story, so I'm going to tell it. And her name is Sawanny. And she said, when do you use an umbrella? And when do you use a softbox? And I said, these are tools that are either the right tool for the job or they aren't. And sometimes they're interchangeable, but you have to really know the tools. And that's where the kitchen analogy comes to play. Know what all of these things do in the kitchen. You can cut a pizza with a pizza roller, or you can cut it with a knife. What is the best tool for the job? Probably the rolling pizza blade. That's not to say it's the only one, but it's the one that was designed to do that particular job. In photography, there's a bunch of different ways to get the job done.
Art, in your opinion, what is the difference between a good and bad composition in photography?
Okay. Good composition takes your eye and it keeps moving through the frame. Good composition makes you, forces you, entices you to continue to look at the picture. That's it's one of the things. And the composition isn't just about where the elements are, it's about where the light is in the picture. So the short answer is that good composition keeps your eyes on the image. Mm-hmm. And bad composition is an element of your looking at it and just turning the page. There are a number of different elements that go into a successful photograph. I'm not going to say a good one or a bad one. I'm going to say successful. And composition is definitely one of them.
Thank you. And what about, you know, some kind of a soul in composition and photography? Sometimes I look some images and I can't forget these images months or years. And sometimes I look image and after 5 minutes, I don't remember. Why is this? How do you think?
Is the portrait or the picture, the landscape, the still life, is it memorable? That's your question. Does it stand the test of time? And does it hit you in the gut? Does it hit you in your soul? Do you want to come back to it? And there are probably 5 or 6 quantifiable answers, and then a bunch of unquantifiable answers, because you might have an attachment to a photograph that is emotional, even though the picture is not that great, because you identify with something in the photograph. But when all of the elements come together, when the lighting and the composition and the subject matter resonates for more than a few people, when it captures a mood or a feeling or a moment, and multitudes of people look at the picture and have an emotional response, a positive response, that's when a picture is successful. And the thing is that you can't manufacture it. Meaning, you can do everything you can to make a picture successful, but at the end of the day, that lasting, soul imprinting, emotional connection is kind of nebulous, and you don't even know necessarily that it's happening. And let me give you an example. I don't know if you've seen the portraiture I did with Lady Gaga.
Yes, of course.
About 2 or 3 years ago. And that was one light, one backdrop, one woman, and a stool in her garage. And as I was capturing her movement and directing her through a number of poses, I was just really happy that I was getting a wide variety of moments. But I got into the car with my interns, and they had been standing just off the camera left and right. And they told me that when they watched Gaga start to move and listened to my exchange with her, they started to cry. And I said, what are you talking about? That's crazy. I've never heard of that. And they said it was just beautiful to watch the two of you work together. And I went, oh, no, that's interesting. And we just drove back down the Coast Highway and came back. And then I got the imagery, and I started to see how there was this, and I do not like to talk about my work like this, but there was this magic in those pictures. And I think it really comes from Gaga's comfort level and what she gave that day, which matched the simplicity of the composition, which matched the simplicity of the light. So everything came together, and everything doesn't come together all the time.
Art, you keep your Instagram very interesting. Do you do it all yourself? Photos, descriptions, etc.?
I love this question because I get asked this question whenever anybody asks me about my Instagram. That's the question. And there are 2 questions. One is, are you doing that all yourself? And the other is, why are you giving away so much information? And the answer is yes. I have written, will write, and do write all of those captions myself. I have never had anybody else write those captions for a number of reasons. 1, I enjoy it. 2, it's very personal. For photographers, Instagram is not social media. For photographers, Instagram is a marketing platform. There's no question. Instagram is a marketing platform. I didn't realize that until I started writing those descriptions behind the scenes, and I started getting feedback from aspiring photographers, people I knew, clients who really appreciated that look at our work. So yes, I write them all myself. The second reason is that social media, this marketing platform, is very prickly. And everybody has an opinion, and everybody can and will share that opinion. I like to remind my younger photographers, I like to remind younger photographers and my younger photo assistants that in the old days, if you wanted to share your opinion on something in public, you had to write a letter to the editor of the newspaper, put it in the mail, and maybe it would get published. Now, you and I can comment on Instagram, Twitter, like right now. It's open season. So I have to be very, very, very sensitive to my subjects, my crew, my clients, the zeitgeist. I have to be really, really thoughtful about what I'm saying because it can and will be misinterpreted. And on every single one of my Instagram posts, every other Instagram post, somebody has something negative to say. They like, why did you do it like this? Or why didn't you hire, blah, blah, blah. Or I don't like the post-production. And I've had to learn over the years to just let it go and not respond, because you cannot win or convince anybody of anything on social media. But if there's something that's really out there, I will say, here's what you might not understand or know about this project. Because the other thing is, the Instagram caption is this long, and the shoot has just, hundreds of different factors going into it. So on any given post, I have to take a slice of the project and talk about the slice of the project. And I will always say, we used an umbrella here and a softbox here and an octabank here and a strip light here, but I'm not saying necessarily what the ratios were, and I'm not hiding anything, but Instagram isn't the place for a 19-page essay about the photo. It's about capturing the spirit of a particular part of the shoot. And it's an outgrowth of my Instagram posts, or an outgrowth of lectures I've been doing for 10 or 12 years, which is taking people behind the scenes of the shoots and showing them how much goes into what my crew and I do.
Several weeks ago, we did an interview with Bill Shapiro, former chef editor of Life magazine, and we spoke about Instagram, and he told about you, and he said that this is, for his opinion, he said this is the best way to work with Instagram, about your Instagram page.
Bill is very kind, and as I told you, I interned at Life magazine a long time ago before Bill was there. I was always a fan of Life magazine. I'm a fan of Bill's and his feed, and I really, really appreciate his saying that. And I know that Bill calls out Instagram feeds of photographers' work he likes, and there are a number of photographers on Instagram who are doing their own thing and doing it beautifully. I'm just doing one thing. All I'm doing is saying, this is what it looked like and behind the scenes, and here's the outcome. So thank you, Bill, for the very, very, very kind words.
Yes. Art, I know that you have lectured for colleges, universities, etc. Could you tell me a little bit about your lectures? What exactly do you teach?
Well, like I was just saying, I started by just showing essentially what you see on Instagram, which is behind the scenes, telling the story of the shoot. Everybody loves a great story, and I love storytelling. So when I would lecture, I would say, here's what it took to get this portrait. Here's what it took to get this group shot. And in the early days, my lectures would be built numerically, like here's what it took to shoot one person, two people, 4, 9, 16, 25, 100, 116 for the Paramount 100 photo. And that's all I did, was I lectured about the story behind the photo. And you and I just talked about the Lady Gaga portraits. And I told you we were photographing her in her garage. Why were we in her garage? You know, what's the backstory? What's the context? Why did I put up just one light? Why did I put up the gray backdrop? So I want to tell those stories. But about 8 years ago, wow, I've been lecturing for more like 15 years. About 8 years ago, Jeff Dunas, a very well known photographer who started the Palm Springs Photo Festival. And it is by far now the leading photo festival in the country. And it's a week-long in the spring, week-long festival. And he invites photojournalists, architecture photographers, beauty photographers, nude photographers, landscape photographers, interior photographers to come and give lectures. And he also invites photo editors, art directors, creative directors, and art buyers to do portfolio reviews. And it is an amazing gathering of just world-class photographers. And he's had some amazing photographers lecture. It's just an honor to be a part of it. Anyway, he called me up and he said, hey, I want you to come do a 4-day workshop. And I said, I'm not doing a 4-day workshop. I can't take 4 days out of my schedule. And he said, come do a 3-day workshop. And I said, I can't do 3 days. And he said, you know what? I'm gonna do the impression of Jeff. He said, come do a 2-day. And I said, I can't do a 2-day. And he said, well, what are you gonna do with 1 day? And I said, okay, here's what I'm gonna do with 1 day. I'm going to stand and just lecture. I'll show my behind the scenes, but then I'm gonna answer any questions that anybody has. And I will answer questions about career, organization, systems, marketing. And he said, well, what kind of questions? And I said, all right, I'll type up the questions. So I typed up like 75 questions and I sent them to Jeff, and he took those 75 questions and he just threw them onto his website. Art will answer all of these questions. So I built 2 other lectures. So behind the scenes, career management, and marketing. And I literally put up the question, when should I go to New York and show my portfolio? And I answer the question. That's my lecture. And during the pandemic, I've been doing that via Zoom.
Art, and the last question. Let's imagine that I'm your student in photography. What are the very first important things you would explain to me about photography? What should I know at the very beginning?
Wow. Okay. So if you are an intern in my office, the first thing I've got to talk to you about is how the office runs. But apart from that, the kind of the overarching ideas for me for a young photographer are, you've got to be shooting. You've got to take your camera with you and shoot and create projects for yourself. You have to be self-employed. You have to be, you have to create personal projects for you. If you want to be a portrait photographer, then you need to come up with portrait projects. If you want to be a photojournalist, you've got to get out there, get into the streets, and chase news. If you want to be a travel photographer, then get in the car and go someplace that isn't Los Angeles. And because we've got a bunch of great places within an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours, and do your travel photography. So constantly be shooting and thinking about photography. Number 2 is go to photo bookstores like Hennessy and Engels and just immerse yourself in historic imagery, get inspired. And then that's on the aesthetic side. On the logistical side, I will say to them, this is a business and you've got to think like a business person. And if you're not a business person, that's fine. You've got to find somebody who is, whether it is your wife, husband, partner, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, best friend, and you've got to work with somebody to manage your business. Because while you want to do your art and do your photography, there's this other commerce side of this business that really does need to be attended to. So you've got to keep those competing left brain, right brain ideas in your head at the same time. So I think it's really, really important for our interns to realize that there's a lot that goes into what we do that isn't just on set. You've got to shoot and familiarize yourself with all of the technical and trial and error and artistic lighting and composition options at your fingertips. And you've got to know how to balance your checkbook. And you've got to understand marketing and client relations and all that goes into supporting your business, because it's a lot. And finally, I say, look, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And you want to have longevity. You theoretically want to be doing this for a long time. So, and this is the tough part, you have to have this balance of insatiable impatience and desire. And at the same time, you've got to be calm and patient and take the long view. Because if you just, burn out very quickly, you're probably not likely to have a very, very long career. And I say to them, there are great examples of people in both our industry and other industries that have had a very, very long career because they've innovated and they've recognized where the industry is going and they've adjusted. And there's a lot of people who got burned out, fed up, didn't like the way the industry changed, didn't want to shoot digital, didn't like that fees had been reduced, and said, enough. I'm going to, open a coffee shop. I'm going to get into real estate. I'm going to just get out of it. So it's a constant battle between art and commerce, patience and impatience. And it's really just about sticking with it. I love to quote one of my favorite movies, Jerry Maguire, in which Tom Cruise is describing to Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character how hard his job is. And what Jerry Maguire says to him is that it is an up at dawn, pride swallowing siege. And while that's true, I still love it. I love the challenge. I love the problem solving. I love finding new ways to do what I do. I love lighting, and I love building the light and using what's in front of me to get the desired effect. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I love sharing it.